Hello guys, in this video we will see how can we handle asynchronous function using promises. Actually the example we have worked on till now, in this example we have handled this asynchronous function using a callback. But what we will do now is we will try to achieve same function using a promise. So for that I'll create one new file. I will name this file as promise.js. In this promise.js I will copy same function. I will paste it here. Since we are not using any callback here, so I will remove the code related to callback. Now this is the asynchronous code. I will comment that code for some time. So this is the function. Since we are implementing this function using a promises, every time we have to a promise object. So for that, a new promise object. Now inside this promise we get two parameters. The first parameter is resolve parameter and the second parameter is a reject parameter. These parameters are itself a method. We will see how we can use it. But whatever the code related to asynchronous process, we put that code inside this function here. Now here, once we put our asynchronous process code inside these promises, we have to run this code. We have to use the benefits of this resolve and reject methods. Now once we put this code inside this function, we have to use either resolve or reject. The thing is that we use resolve when there is successful execution of our function, we get some data, and we use a reject when some error happens. So for now, let's say we are implemented this function successfully and this function generate a data number 1. So for that I will use resolve and I will pass the data through this resolve function. Now the question is how to call this asynchronous function. Actually we have seen in callback we handle all this function inside this function, but in promise we call this asynchronous function at first and we get two methods. First method is then method and second method is a catch method. So when we use this then method, when we use this catch method, we use then method when we get data through resolve and we use catch method when we get data through this reject method whenever some error happens. So actually in then we get a data through callback, and as you can see we get data here. We can directly print that data. And if an error happens, we get that error through this catch function. Through the callback we get data through this callback as an error, and in fact we can print that error using console.log. So this is how we implement any asynchronous function using a promise, that we return a promise object using either resolve or reject method. Let's run this code. Let's see what happens. So what I will do, I'll run this code, and after 2 seconds we get a data printed as a 1 since we are passing it through resolve. But instead of resolve, if an error happened, we call reject method instead of resolve, and as we have used reject method, we will pass some message because we call reject method when some error happen. Now if we run this code, after 2 seconds this catch block will execute, and from this catch block we will get the error message we are passing through reject function. So basically in promise we use two functions, resolve and reject, and we directly get data through it. We handle it through then and catch method. So this is using a callback function where we get error or data which is totally positional based, but in promise we get data which is depend on method. Our data either come through resolve or our data either come through reject. So there are many examples in outer world which uses promises. So one of the main method which is in a JavaScript which use a promises to handle asynchronous function is the fetch method. A fetch API method, when we call this fetch API, for example this one, we call some API using the fetch, it always returns some promise. That's why we are using this then method.